Hello, sir. How are we doing this evening? I am upright and mobile. Hey, Lynn, how are you? Got to get all monstered up so I don't fall asleep. Any day above the grass. Hey, Wings. My grandfather used to say, as long as the ground is under my feet and not 6 feet over my head, I'm not doing too bad. Of course, joke's on us. He's sitting in an urn on my shelf. So he's still above the grass. And honestly, he would think that was hilarious. It's just the kind of guy he was. I'm doing just fine, Ronnie. How about yourself? I am getting ready to read. And we had a good live on Sunday, and I'm hoping just as many people, if not more, come back tonight. Hey DK, how are you, sir? Well, thank you, Ash. I appreciate that. Marky, is Ezra with you? Ah, that answers my question. Hey, Ezra, how are you, buddy? Yes, Wings, my hair is less floofy tonight. Mostly because I haven't washed it since Sunday, so. Hey, Amy. Awesome. Grandma D9, I have had a day. It's been an up and down couple of days. I have an audiobook that I'm working on that it's got 700 pages and 50 chapters, and it's good, but it's a lot. And I had some interesting things happen yesterday, so I can't tell you about them yet, but hopefully I will be able to soon. Two hours. I am actually going to be putting a list of the audiobooks that I currently have up on Audible on my website very soon. I just got to get time to put it together. Hey, Crazy Mama, how are you? Oh, DK, that's cool. That's a really good show. I've seen that before myself. Ash, I totally understand. Clint, we'll be starting in a couple of minutes here. Hey, Songbird, how are you? Well, Tina, I appreciate that. It's you're not the only person that says that to me. Hey, Eddie, welcome in. How are you, brother? All right, well, we're going to give it about a minute more, and then we will get started. Oh, that is compliments of DK Art, who is currently in the chat. He was the first person I thought of when I decided I was going to collaborate with an artist for this event, because his style just matches the vibe I was looking for. And he's a great guy and a good friend. And yeah, actually, I know I mentioned this on Sunday. Hey, Claire. Welcome from Ireland. I know I mentioned this on Sunday, but I started coloring in his coloring book. You guys can see that. I just freaking love it. Thank you, Amy. Hey, Toasted, welcome in. Hey, Sarah. I am also live on YouTube, Katie. Yeah, it would. All right, well, I think it's time we get started. I am so glad you have all come back. I see a lot of names that I recognize and a few that seem that look new. And I appreciate you guys for being here. So, well, good evening, everyone, and welcome back to Storytime with Undead Papa. Tonight, we continue our journey through L. Frank Baum's The Wonderful Wizard of Oz. Last time, Dorothy met new friends, followed the Yellow Brick Road, and journeyed deeper into the strange and wonderful land of Oz. But tonight, their journey grows more dangerous, for deep within a field of deadly poppies, Dorothy and the Cowardly Lion have fallen asleep. So, wherever you're listening from, dim the lights, sit back and relax, because story time is about to begin. This is Night 2 of The Wonderful Wizard of Oz. Chapter 9. The Queen of the Field Mice. "We can't be far from the Yellow Brick Road now," remarked the Scarecrow as he stood beside the girl, "for we have come nearly as far as the river carried us away." The Tin Woodman was about to reply when he heard a low growl, and turning his head, which worked beautifully on hinges, he saw a strange beast come bounding over the grass toward them. It was indeed a great yellow wildcat, and the woodman thought it must be chasing something, for its ears were lying close to its head, and its mouth was wide open, showing 2 rows of ugly teeth, while its red eyes glowed like balls of fire. As it came nearer, the Tin Woodman saw that running before the beast was a little gray field mouse, and although he had no heart, he knew it was wrong for the wildcat to try to kill such a pretty, harmless creature. So the woodman raised his axe, and as the wildcat ran by, he gave it a quick blow that cut the beast's head clean off from its body, and it rolled over at his feet in 2 pieces. The field mouse, now that it was freed from its enemy, stopped short, and coming slowly up to the woodman, said in a squeaky little voice, "Oh, thank you. Thank you ever so much for saving my life." "Don't speak of it, I beg of you," replied the woodman. "I have no heart, you know, so I am careful to help all those who may need a friend, even if it happens to be only a mouse." "Only a mouse?" cried the little animal indignantly. "Why, I am a queen, the queen of all field mice." "Oh, indeed," said the woodman, making a bow. "Therefore you have done a great deed, as well as a brave one in saving my life," added the queen. At that moment several mice were seen running up as fast as their little legs could carry them, and when they saw their queen, they exclaimed, "Oh, your majesty, we thought you would be killed. How did you manage to escape the great wildcat?" They all bowed so low to the little queen that they almost stood upon their heads. "This funny tin man," she answered, "killed the wildcat and saved my life. So hereafter you must all serve him and obey his slightest wish." "We will!" cried all the mice in a shrill chorus. And then they scampered in all directions, for Toto had awakened from his sleep. And seeing all these mice around him, he gave one bark of delight and jumped right into the middle of the group. Toto had always loved to chase mice when he lived in Kansas, and he saw no harm in it. But the Tin Woodman caught the dog in his arms and held him tight, while he called to the mice, "Come back! Come back! Toto shall not hurt you." At this, the queen of the mice stuck her head out from underneath the clump of grass and asked in a timid voice, "Are you sure he will not bite us?" "I will not let him," said the woodman, "so do not be afraid." One by one, the mice came creeping back, and Toto did not bark again, although he tried to get out of the woodman's arms, and would have bitten him had he not known very well he was made of tin. Finally, one of the biggest mice spoke. "Is there anything we can do," it asked, "to repay you for saving the life of our queen?" "Nothing that I know of," answered the woodman. But the Scarecrow, who had been trying to think, but could not because his head was stuffed with straw, said quickly, "Oh, yes, you can save our friend, the Cowardly Lion, who is asleep in the poppy field." "A lion?" cried the little queen. "Why, he would eat us all up." "Oh, no," declared the Scarecrow. "This lion is a coward." "Really?" asked the mouse. "He says so himself," answered the Scarecrow, "and he would never hurt anyone who is our friend. If you will help us to save him, I promise that he shall treat you all with kindness." "Very well," said the queen. "We trust you. But what shall we do?" "Are there many of these mice which call you queen and are willing to obey you?" "Oh, yes, there are thousands," she replied. "Then send for them all to come here as soon as possible, and let each one bring a long piece of string." The queen turned to the mice that attended her and told them to go at once and get all her people. As soon as they heard her orders, they ran away in every direction as fast as possible. "Now," said the Scarecrow to the Tin Woodman, "you must go to those trees by the riverside and make a truck that will carry the lion." So the woodman went at once to the trees and began to work. And he soon made a truck out of the limbs of trees, from which he chopped away all the leaves and branches. He fastened it together with wooden pegs and made the 4 wheels out of short pieces of a big tree trunk. So fast and so well did he work that by the time the mouse began to arrive, the truck was all ready for them. They came from all directions, and there were thousands of them, big mice and little mice and middle-sized mice, and each one brought a piece of string in his mouth. It was about this time that Dorothy awoke from her long sleep and opened her eyes. She was greatly astonished to find herself lying upon the grass with thousands of mice standing around looking at her timidly. But the Scarecrow told her about everything, and turning to the dignified little mouse, he said, "Permit me to introduce to you Her Majesty the Queen." Dorothy nodded gravely, and the Queen made a curtsy, after which she became quite friendly with the little girl. The Scarecrow and the Woodman now began to fasten the mice to the truck, using the strings they had brought. On one end of a string was tied around the neck of each mouse, and the other end to the truck. Of course, the truck was 1,000 times bigger than any of the mice who were to draw it. But when all the mice had been harnessed, they were able to pull it quite easily. Even the Scarecrow and the Tin Woodman could sit on it, and were drawn swiftly by their queer little horses to the place where the lion lay asleep. After a great deal of hard work, for the lion was heavy, they managed to get him up on the truck. Then the Queen hurriedly gave her people the order to start, for she feared if the mice stayed among the poppies too long, they would also fall asleep. At first the little creatures, many though they were, could hardly stir the heavily loaded truck. But the Woodman and the Scarecrow both pushed from behind, and they got along better. Soon they rolled the lion out of the poppy bed to the green fields, where he could breathe the sweet, fresh air again, instead of the poisonous scent of the flowers. Dorothy came to meet them and thanked the little mice warmly for saving her companion from death. She had grown so fond of the big lion, she was glad he had been rescued. Then the mice were unharnessed from the truck and scampered away through the grass to their homes. The Queen of the Mice was last to leave. "If you ever need us again," she said, "come out into the field and call. We shall hear you and come to your assistance. Goodbye." After this... Oh, wait, hang on. Let me back up. Skipped a whole paragraph. "Goodbye," they all answered, and away the Queen ran, while Dorothy held Toto tightly lest he should run after her and frighten her. After this they sat down beside the lion until he should awaken, and the Scarecrow brought Dorothy some fruit from a tree nearby, which she ate for her dinner. Chapter 10. The Guardian of the Gate. It was some time before the Cowardly Lion awakened, for he had lain among the poppies a long while, breathing in their deadly fragrance. But when he did open his eyes and roll off the truck, he was very glad to find himself still alive. "I ran as fast as I could," he said, sitting down and yawning. "But the flowers were too strong for me. How did you get me out?" Then they told him of the field mice, and how they had generously saved him from death. And the Cowardly Lion laughed and said, "I have always thought myself very big and terrible, yet such little things as flowers came near to killing me. And such small animals as mice have saved my life. How strange it all is! But, comrades, what shall we do now?" "We must journey until we find the road of yellow brick again," said Dorothy, "and then we can keep on to the Emerald City." So, the lion being fully refreshed and feeling quite himself again, they all started upon the journey, greatly enjoying the walk through the soft, fresh grass. And it was not long before they reached the road of yellow brick, and turned again toward the Emerald City, where the great Oz dwelt. The road was smooth and well paved now, and the country about was beautiful, so that the travelers rejoiced in leaving the forest far behind, and with it the many dangers they had met in its gloomy shades. Once more they could see fences built beside the road, but these were painted green, and when they came to a small house in which a farmer evidently lived, that was also painted green. They passed by several of these houses during the afternoon, and sometimes people came to the doors and looked at them as if they would like to ask questions. But no one came near them nor spoke to them because of the great lion, of which they were very much afraid. The people were all dressed in clothing of a lovely emerald green color, and wore peaked hats like those of the Munchkins. "This must be the land of Oz," said Dorothy, "and we are surely getting near the Emerald City."
"Yes," answered the Scarecrow. "Everything is green here, while in the country of the Munchkins blue was the favorite color. But the people do not seem to be as friendly as the Munchkins, and I'm afraid we shall be unable to find a place to pass the night."
"I should like something to eat besides fruit," said the girl, "and I'm sure Toto is nearly starved. Let us stop at the next house and talk to the people." So, when they came to a good-sized farmhouse, Dorothy walked boldly up to the door and knocked. A woman opened it just far enough to look out, and said,
"What do you want, child, and why is that great lion with you?"
"We wish to pass the night with you, if you will allow us," answered Dorothy, "and the lion is my friend and comrade, and would not hurt you for the world."
"Is he tame?"
asked the woman, opening the door a little wider. "Oh, yes," said the girl, "and he is a great coward, too. He will be more afraid of you than you are of him."
"Well,"
said the woman, after thinking it over and taking another peep at the lion, "if that is the case, you may come in. I will give you some supper and a place to sleep." So they all entered the house, where there were, besides the woman, 2 children and a man. The man had hurt his leg and was lying on the couch in the corner. They seemed greatly surprised to see so strange a company. While the woman was busy laying the table, the man asked, "Where are you all going?"
"To the Emerald City," said Dorothy, "to see the great Oz."
"Oh, indeed!" exclaimed the man. "Are you sure that Oz will see you?"
"Why not?" she replied.
"Why, it is said that he never lets anyone come into his presence. I have been to the Emerald City many times, and it is a beautiful and wonderful place, but I have never been permitted to see the great Oz, nor do I know of any living person who has seen him."
"Does he ever go out?" asked the Scarecrow.
"Never. He sits day after day in the great throne room of his palace, and even those who wait upon him do not see him face to face."
"What is he like?" asked the girl.
"That is hard to tell," said the man thoughtfully. "You see, Oz is a great wizard, and can take on any form he wishes, so that some say he looks like a bird, and some say he looks like an elephant, and some say he looks like a cat. To others he appears as a beautiful fairy, or a brownie, or in any other form that pleases him. But who the real Oz is when he is in his own form, no living person can tell."
"That is very strange," said Dorothy, "but we must try in some way to see him, or we shall have made our journey for nothing."
"Why do you wish to see the terrible Oz?" asked the man.
"I want him to give me some brains," said the Scarecrow.
"Oh, Oz could do that easily enough," declared the man. "He has more brains than he needs."
"And I want him to give me a heart," said the Tin Woodman.
"That will not trouble him," continued the man, "for Oz has a large collection of hearts of all sizes and shapes." "And I want him to give me courage," said the Cowardly Lion. "Oz keeps a great pot of courage in his throne room," said the man, "which he has covered with a golden plate to keep it from running over. He will be glad to give you some."
"And I want him to send me back to Kansas," said Dorothy.
"Where is Kansas?" asked the man with surprise.
I don't know," replied Dorothy sorrowfully, "but it is my home, and I'm sure it's somewhere."
"Very likely. Well, Oz can do anything, so I suppose he will find Kansas for you. But first you must get to see him, and that will be a hard task, for the Great Wizard does not like to see anyone, and he usually has his own way. But what do you want?" he continued, speaking to Toto. Toto only wagged his tail, for strange to say, he could not speak. The woman now called to them that supper was ready, so they gathered around the table, and Dorothy ate some delicious porridge and a dish of scrambled eggs, and a plate of nice white bread, and enjoyed her meal. The lion ate some of the porridge, but did not care for it, saying it was made from oats, and oats were food for horses, not for lions. The Scarecrow and the Tin Woodman ate nothing at all. Toto ate a little of everything, and was glad to get a good supper again. The woman now gave Dorothy a bed to sleep in, and Toto laid down beside her, while the lion guarded the door of her room so she might not be disturbed. The Scarecrow and the Tin Woodman stood up in a corner and kept quiet all night, although, of course, they could not sleep. The next morning, as soon as the sun was up, they started on their way, and soon saw a beautiful green glow in the sky just before them.
"That must be the Emerald City," said Dorothy.
As they walked on, the green glow became brighter and brighter, and it seemed that at last they were nearing the end of their travels. Yet it was afternoon before they came to the great wall that surrounded the city. It was high and thick, and of a bright green color. In front of them, and at the end of the road of yellow brick, was a big gate, all studded with emeralds that glittered so in the sun that even the painted eyes of the Scarecrow were dazzled by their brilliancy. There was a bell beside the gate, and Dorothy pushed the button and heard a silvery tinkle sound within. Then the big gate swung slowly open, and they all passed through and found themselves in a high arched room, the walls of which glistened with countless emeralds. Before them stood a little man about the same size as the Munchkins. He was clothed in all green from his head to his feet, and even his skin was of a greenish tint. At his side was a large green box. When he saw Dorothy and her companions, the man asked, "What do you wish in the Emerald City?"
"We came here to see the great Oz," said Dorothy. The man was so surprised at this answer that he sat down to think it over.
"It has been many years since anyone asked me to see Oz," he said, shaking his head in perplexity. "He is powerful and terrible, and if you come on an idle or foolish errand to bother the wise reflections of the Great Wizard, he might be angry and destroy you all in an instant." "But it is not a foolish errand, nor an idle one," replied the Scarecrow. "It is important, and we have been told that Oz is a good wizard." "So he is," said the Green Man, "and he rules the Emerald City wisely and well. But to those who are not honest, or who approach him from curiosity, he is most terrible, and few have ever dared to ask to see his face. I am the guardian of the gates, and since you demand to see the great Oz, I must take you to his palace. But first, you must put on the spectacles."
"Why?" asked Dorothy.
"Because if you did not wear the spectacles, the brightness and glory of the Emerald City would blind you. Even those who live in the city must wear spectacles night and day,
They are all locked on, for Oz so ordered it when the city was first built, and I have the only key that will unlock them." He opened the big box, and Dorothy saw that it was filled with spectacles of every size and shape. All of them had green glasses in them. The guardian of the gates found a pair that would just fit Dorothy and put them over her eyes. There were 2 golden bands fastened to them that passed around the back of her head, where they were locked together by a little key that was at the end of a chain the guardian of the gates wore around his neck. When they were on, Dorothy could not take them off had she wished. But of course she did not wish to be blinded by the glare of the Emerald City, so she said nothing. Then the Green Man fitted the spectacles for the Scarecrow and the Tin Woodman and the Lion and even little Toto. All were locked fast with a key. Then the guardian of the gates put on his own glasses and told them he was ready to show them to the palace. Taking a big golden key from a peg on the wall, he opened another gate, and they all followed him through the portal into the streets of the Emerald City. Well, I appreciate all the likes and shares. Hey, Rita, how are you? Does not seem that TikTok wants to show me to anybody tonight, but, hey, it's okay. Hey, Joe, welcome in. If you're just arriving, you are right on time. Chapter 11, The Wonderful City of Oz. Even with eyes protected by the green spectacles, Dorothy and her friends were at first dazzled by the brilliancy of the wonderful city. The streets were lined with beautiful houses, all built of green marble and studded everywhere with sparkling emeralds. They walked over a pavement of the same green marble, and where the blocks were joined together were rows of emeralds set closely and glittering in the brightness of the sun. The window panes were of green glass. Even the sky above the city had a green tint, and the rays of the sun were green. There were many people, men, women, and children, walking about, and these were all dressed in green clothes and had greenish skins. They all looked at Dorothy and her strangely assorted company with wondering eyes, and the children all ran away and hid behind their mothers when they saw the lion, but no one spoke to them. Many shops stood in the street, and Dorothy saw that everything in them was green. Green candy and green popcorn were offered for sale, as well as green shoes, green hats, and green clothes of all sorts. At one place a man was selling green lemonade, and when the children bought it, Dorothy could see that they paid for it with green pennies. There seemed to be no horses nor animals of any kind. The men carried things around in little green carts, which they pushed before them. Everyone seemed happy and contented and prosperous. The guardian of the gates led them through the streets until they came to a big building exactly in the middle of the city, which was the Palace of Oz, the Great Wizard. There was a soldier before the door dressed in a green uniform and wearing a long green beard. "Here are the strangers," said the guardian of the great gates to him, "and they demand to see the Great Oz." "Step aside," answered the soldier, "and I will carry your message to him." So they passed through the palace gates and were led into a big room with a green carpet and lovely green furniture set with emeralds. The soldier made them all wipe their feet upon a green mat before entering this room, and when they were seated, he said politely, "Please make yourselves comfortable while I go to the door of the throne room and tell Oz you are here."
They had to wait a long time before the soldier returned. When at last he came back, Dorothy asked,
"Have you seen Oz?"
"Oh, no," returned the soldier. "I have never seen him, but I spoke to him as he sat behind his screen and gave him your message. He said he will grant you an audience if you so desire, but each one of you must enter his presence alone, and he will admit but one each day. Therefore, as you must remain in the palace for several days, I will have you shown to rooms where you may rest in comfort after your journey."
"Thank you," replied the girl. "That is very kind of Oz."
The soldier now blew upon a green whistle, and at once a young girl dressed in a pretty green silk gown entered the room. She had lovely green hair and green eyes, and she bowed low before Dorothy, and she said,
"Follow me. I will show you to your room."
So Dorothy said good-bye to all her friends except Toto, and taking the dog in her arms, followed the green girl through 7 passages and up 3 flights of stairs until they came to a room at the front of the palace. It was the sweetest little room in the world, with a soft, comfortable bed that had sheets of green silk and a green velvet counterpane. There was a tiny fountain in the middle of the room that shot a spray of green perfume into the air, to fall back onto the beautifully carved green marble basin. Beautiful green flowers stood in the windows, and there was a shelf with a row of little green books. When Dorothy had time to open these books, she found them full of queer green pictures that made her laugh. They were so funny. In a wardrobe were many green dresses made of silk and satin and velvet, and all of them fitted Dorothy exactly.
"Make yourself perfectly at home," said the green girl, "and if you wish for anything, ring the bell. Oz will send for you tomorrow morning." She left Dorothy alone and went back to the others. These she also led to rooms, and each one of them found himself lodged in a very pleasant part of the palace. Of course, this politeness was wasted on the Scarecrow, for when he found himself alone in his room, he stood stupidly in one spot, just within the doorway, to wait till morning. It would not rest him to lie down, and he could not close his eyes. So he remained all night staring at a little spider which was weaving its web in a corner of the room, just as if it were not one of the most wonderful rooms in the world. The Tin Woodman lay down on his bed from force of habit, for he remembered when he was made of flesh, but not being able to sleep, he passed the night moving his joints up and down to make sure they kept in good working order. The lion would have preferred a bed of dried leaves in the forest, and did not like being shut up in a room, but he had too much sense to let this worry him. So he sprang upon the bed, and rolled himself up like a cat, and purred himself asleep in a minute. The next morning, after breakfast, the Green Maiden came to fetch Dorothy, and she dressed her in one of the prettiest gowns made of green brocaded satin. Dorothy put on a green silk apron and tied a green ribbon around Toto's neck, and they started for the throne room of the great Oz. First they came to a great hall in which were many ladies and gentlemen of the court, all dressed in rich costumes. These people had nothing to do but talk to each other, but they always came to wait outside the throne room every morning, although they were never permitted to see Oz. As Dorothy entered, they looked at her curiously, and one of them whispered, "Are you really going to look upon the face of Oz the Terrible?" "Of course," answered the girl, "if he will see me."
"Oh, he will see you," said the soldier who had taken her message to the wizard, "although he does not like to have people ask to see him. Indeed, at first he was angry and said I should send you back to where you came from. Then he asked me what you looked like, and when I mentioned your silver shoes, he was very much interested. At last I told him about the mark upon your forehead, and he decided he would admit you to his presence. Just then a bell rang, and the green girl said to Dorothy,
"That is the signal. You must go into the throne room alone."
She opened a little door, and Dorothy walked boldly through and found herself in a wonderful place. It was a big, round room with a high, arched roof, and the walls and ceiling and floor were covered with large emeralds set closely together. In the center of the roof was a great light, as bright as the sun, which made the emeralds sparkle in a wonderful manner. But what interested Dorothy was the big throne of green marble that stood in the middle of the room. It was shaped like a chair and sparkled with gems, as did everything else. In the center of the chair was an enormous head, without a body to support it or any arms or legs whatsoever. There was no hair upon its head, but it had eyes and a nose and mouth, and was much bigger than the head of the biggest giant. As Dorothy gazed upon this in wonder and fear, the eyes turned slowly and looked at her sharply and steadily. Then the mouth moved, and Dorothy heard a voice say, "I am Oz, the great and terrible. Who are you, and why do you seek me?" It was not such an awful voice as she had expected to come from the big head, so she took courage and answered,
"I am Dorothy, the small and meek. I have come to you for help."
The eyes looked at her thoughtfully for a full minute. Then said the voice, "Where did you get the silver shoes?"
"I got them from the Wicked Witch of the East, when my house fell upon her and killed her," she replied.
"Where did you get the mark upon your forehead?" continued the voice.
"That is where the Good Witch of the North kissed me when she bade me good-bye and sent me to you," said the girl.
Again the eyes looked at her sharply, and they saw she was telling the truth. Then Oz asked, "What do you wish me to do?"
"Send me back to Kansas, where my Aunt Em and Uncle Henry are," she answered earnestly. "I don't like your country, although it is so beautiful, and I am sure Aunt Em will be dreadfully worried over my being away for so long."
The eyes winked 3 times, and then they turned up to the ceiling and down to the floor, and rolled around so clearly that they seemed to see every part of the room. And at last they looked at Dorothy again. "Why should I do this for you?" asked Oz.
"Because you are strong, and I am weak. Because you are a great wizard, and I am only a little girl."
"But you were strong enough to kill the Wicked Witch of the East," said Oz.
"That just happened," returned Dorothy simply. "I could not help it."
"Well," said the head, "I will give you my answer. You have no right to expect me to send you back to Kansas unless you do something for me in return. In this country, everyone must pay for everything he gets. If you wish me to use my magic power to send you home again, you must do something for me first. Help me, and I will help you."
"What must I do?" asked the girl.
"Kill the Wicked Witch of the West," answered Oz.
"But I cannot!" exclaimed Dorothy, greatly surprised.
You killed the Witch of the East, and you wear the silver shoes, which bear a powerful charm. There is now but one wicked witch left in all this land, and when you can tell me she is dead, I will send you back to Kansas, but not before." The little girl began to weep. She was so much disappointed, and the eyes winked again and looked upon her anxiously, as if the great Oz felt that she could help him if she would.
"I never killed anything willingly," she sobbed. "Even if I wanted to, how could I kill the wicked witch? If you, who are great and terrible, cannot kill her yourself, how do you expect me to do it?"
"I do not know," said the head, "but that is my answer. And until the wicked witch dies, you will not see your uncle and aunt again. Remember that the witch is wicked, tremendously wicked, and ought to be killed. Now go, and do not ask to see me again until you have done your task." Sorrowfully, Dorothy left the throne room and went back to where the lion and the scarecrow and the Tin Woodman were waiting to hear what Oz had said to her.
"There is no hope for me," she said sadly, "for Oz will not send me home until I have killed the Wicked Witch of the West, and that I can never do."
Her friends were sorry, but could do nothing to help her. So Dorothy went to her own room and lay down on the bed and cried herself to sleep. The next morning the soldier with the green whiskers came to the scarecrow and said, "Come with me, for Oz has sent for you." So the scarecrow followed him and was admitted into the great throne room, where he saw sitting in the emerald throne a most lovely lady. She was dressed in green silk gauze, and wore upon her flowing green locks a crown of jewels. Growing from her shoulders were wings, gorgeous in color, and so light that they fluttered if the slightest breath of air reached them. When the scarecrow had bowed, as prettily as his straw stuffing would let him, before this beautiful creature, she looked upon him sweetly and said, "I am Oz, the great and terrible. Who are you, and why do you seek me?" Now the scarecrow, who had expected to see the great head Dorothy had told him of, was much astonished, but he answered her bravely. "I am only a scarecrow stuffed with straw. Therefore I have no brains, and I come to you praying that you will put brains in my head instead of straw, so that I may become as much a man as any other in your dominions." "Why should I do this for you?" asked the lady. "Because you are wise and powerful, and no one else can help me," answered the scarecrow. "I never grant favors without some return," said Oz. "But this much I will promise. If you kill for me the Wicked Witch of the West, I will bestow upon you a great many brains, and such good brains that you will be the wisest man in all the land of Oz." "I thought you asked Dorothy to kill the witch," said the scarecrow in surprise. "So I did. I don't care who kills her, but until she is dead, I will not grant your wish. Now go, and do not seek me again until you have earned the brains you so greatly desire." The scarecrow went sorrowfully back to his friends and told them what Oz had said, and Dorothy was surprised to find that the great wizard was not a head as she had seen him, but a lovely lady. "All the same," said the scarecrow, "she needs a heart as much as the Tin Woodman." On the next morning, the soldier with the green whiskers came to the Tin Woodman and said, "Oz has sent for you. Follow me." So the Tin Woodman followed him and came to the great throne room. He did not know whether he would find Oz a lovely lady or a head, but he hoped it would be the lovely lady, for he said to himself, "If it is a head, I'm sure I shall not be given a heart, since a head has no heart of its own, and therefore cannot feel for me.
But if it is the lovely lady, I shall beg hard for a heart, for all ladies are themselves said to be kindly hearted. But when the woodman entered the great throne room, he saw neither the head nor the lady, for Oz had taken on the shape of a most terrible beast. It was nearly as big as an elephant, and the green throne seemed hardly strong enough to hold its weight. The beast had a head like that of a rhinoceros, only there were 5 eyes in its face. There were 5 long arms growing out of its body, and it also had 5 long, slim legs. Thick, woolly hair covered every part of it, and a more dreadful-looking monster could not be imagined. It was fortunate the Tin Woodman had no heart at that moment, for it would have beat loud and fast from terror. But being only tin, the Woodman was not at all afraid, although he was much disappointed.
"I am Oz, the great and terrible," spoke the beast in a voice that was one great roar. "Who are you, and why do you seek me?"
"I am a woodman, and made of tin. Therefore I have no heart, and cannot love. I pray you to give me a heart, that I may be as other men are."
"Why should I do this?" demanded the beast.
"Because I ask it, and you alone can grant my request," answered the woodman.
Oz gave a low growl at this, but said gruffly, "If you indeed desire a heart, you must earn it."
"How?" asked the woodman.
"Help Dorothy to kill the wicked witch of the West," replied the beast. "When the witch is dead, come to me, and I will give you the biggest and kindest and most loving heart in all the land of Oz."
So the Tin Woodman was forced to return sorrowfully to his friends and tell them of the terrible beast he had seen. They all wondered greatly at the many forms the great wizard could take upon himself. And the lion said, "If he is a beast when I go to see him, I shall roar my loudest, and so frighten him that he will grant all I ask. If he is a lovely lady, I shall pretend to spring upon her, and so compel her to do my bidding. But if he is the great head, he will be at my mercy, for I will roll this head all about the room until he promises to give us what we desire. So be of good cheer, my friends, for all will yet be well." The next morning the soldier with the green whiskers led the lion to the great throne room and bade him enter the presence of Oz. The lion at once passed through the door, glancing around, saw to his surprise that before the throne was a ball of fire, so fierce and glowing he could scarcely bear to gaze upon it. His first thought was that Oz had by accident caught on fire and was burning up. But when he tried to go nearer, the heat was so intense that it singed his whiskers, and he crept back tremblingly to a spot nearer the door. Then a low, quiet voice came from the ball of fire, and these were the words it spoke. "I am Oz, the great and terrible. Who are you, and why do you seek me?" And the lion answered, "I am a cowardly lion, afraid of everything. I came to you to beg that you give me courage, so that in reality I may become the king of beasts, as men call me."
"Why should I give you courage?" demanded Oz.
"Because of all wizards, you are the greatest."
You gotta be kidding me. Good Lord. TikTok is freaking... Yeah. We love TikTok, and we love the TikTok shop. I'm not a bot, TikTok. I'm right here. Anyway, let me start this over.
Why should I give you courage? Demanded Oz.
Because of all wizards, you are the greatest and alone have the power to grant my request, answered the lion. The ball of fire burned fiercely for a time, and the voice said,
Bring me proof that the wicked witch is dead, and that moment I will give you courage. But as long as the witch lives, you must remain a coward.
The lion was angry at this speech, but could say nothing in reply. And while he stood silently gazing at the ball of fire, it became so furiously hot that he turned tail and rushed from the room. He was glad to find his friends waiting for him, and told them of his terrible interview with the wizard. "What should we do now?" asked Dorothy. "There's only one thing we can do," returned the lion. "And that is go to the land of the Winkies, seek out the wicked witch, and destroy her." "But suppose we cannot," said the girl. "Then I shall never have courage," declared the lion.
"And shall never have brains," added the Scarecrow.
"And I shall never have a heart," spoke the Tin Woodman. "And I shall never see Aunt Em and Uncle Henry," said Dorothy, beginning to cry. "Be careful," cried the green girl. "The tears will fall on your green silk gown and spot it." So Dorothy dried her eyes and said, "I suppose we must try it, but I am sure I do not want to kill anybody, even to see Aunt Em again." "I will go with you, but I'm too much of a coward to kill the witch," said the lion.
"I will go too," declared the Scarecrow, "but I shall not be of much help to you. I am such a fool."
"I haven't the heart to harm even a witch," remarked the Tin Woodman. "But if you go, I certainly shall go with you." Therefore it was decided to start upon their journey the next morning. And the woodman sharpened his axe on a green grindstone and had all of his joints properly oiled. The Scarecrow stuffed himself with fresh straw, and Dorothy put new paint on his eyes that he might see better. The green girl, who was very kind to them, filled Dorothy's basket with good things to eat and fastened a little bell around Toto's neck with a green ribbon. They went to bed quite early and slept soundly until daylight, when they were awakened by the crowing of a green cock that lived in the backyard of the palace and the cackling of a hen that had laid a green egg. Well, thank you for all the likes, you guys, and the shares and everything. That really helps. It really does. All right, so were you enjoying the story so far? That's a good one, Joe. I like that.
"Do you like green eggs and ham?"
"I do not like them, Sam, I am." I used to read Green Eggs and Ham to my kids, but I would read it in really weird voices. And they would, yeah. "Read it normal, Daddy." Oh. Yeah, and it's funny because I mean, there's so many differences between the movie uh, and the book, how much they left out and the things that they changed. It is very different. It is very different. Alrighty then. Well, let us continue. No, there is no normal Seuss. But you got to do the voices. I mean, that's like a parent reading a book requirement. I think. Oh, thank you, Corey. I appreciate you. Chapter 12: The Search for the Wicked Witch. The soldier with the green whiskers led them through the streets of the Emerald City until they reached the room where the guardian of the gates lived. This officer unlocked their spectacles to put them back in his great box. I hope he washed them. And then he politely opened the gate for our friends. "Which road leads to the Wicked Witch of the West?" asked Dorothy. "There is no road," answered the guardian of the gates. "No one ever wishes to go that way." "Then how then are we to find her?" inquired the girl. "That will be easy," replied the man, "for when she knows you are in the country of the Winkies, she will find you and make you all her slaves." "Perhaps not," said the Scarecrow, "for we mean to destroy her." "Oh, that is different," said the guardian of the gates. "No one has ever destroyed her before, so I naturally thought she would make slaves of you, as she has the rest. But take care, for she is wicked and fierce, and may not allow you to destroy her. Keep to the west where the sun sets, and you cannot fail to find her." They thanked him and bade him good-bye, and turned toward the west, walking over fields of soft grass, dotted here and there with daisies and buttercups. Dorothy still wore the pretty silk dress she had put on in the palace, but now, to her surprise, she found it was no longer green, but pure white. The ribbon around Toto's neck had also lost its green color, and was as white as Dorothy's shoes. Or Dorothy's dress. Yeah, okay. I can read, I swear. The Emerald City was soon left far behind. As they advanced, the ground became rougher and hillier, for there were no farms nor houses in this country of the West, and the ground was untilled. In the afternoon the sun shone hot in their faces, for there were no trees to offer them shade, so that before night Dorothy and Toto and the lion were tired, and lay down upon the grass and fell asleep, with the woodman and the Scarecrow keeping watch. Now the Wicked Witch of the West had but one eye, yet that was as powerful as a telescope, and could see everywhere. So, as she sat in the door of her castle, she happened to look around and saw Dorothy lying asleep with her friends all about her. They were a long distance off, but the Wicked Witch was angry to find them in her country. So she blew upon a silver whistle that hung around her neck. At once there came running to her from all directions a pack of great wolves. They had long legs and fierce eyes and sharp teeth. "Go to these people," said the witch, "and tear them to pieces." "Are you going to make them your slaves?" asked the leader of the wolves. "No," she answered. "One is of tin, and one of straw. One is a girl, and another a lion. None of them is fit to work, so you may tear them into small pieces." "Very well," said the wolf, and he dashed away at full speed, followed by the others. It was lucky the Scarecrow and the Woodman were wide awake and heard the wolves coming. "This is my fight,"
said the woodman. So get behind me, and I will meet them as they come. He seized his axe, which he had made very sharp, and as the leader of the wolves came on, the Tin Woodman swung his arm and chopped the wolf's head from its body, so that it immediately died. As soon as he could raise his axe, another wolf came up, and he also fell under the sharp edge of the Tin Woodman's weapon. There were 40 wolves, and 40 times a wolf was killed, so that at last they all lay dead in a heap before the woodman. Then he put down his axe and sat beside the Scarecrow, who said, "It was a good fight, friend." They waited until Dorothy awoke the next morning. The little girl was quite frightened when she saw the great pile of shaggy wolves, but the Tin Woodman told her all. She thanked him for saving them and sat down to breakfast, after which they started again upon their journey. Now this same morning the Wicked Witch came to the door of her castle and looked out with her one eye that could see far off. She saw all her wolves lying dead, and the strangers still traveling through her country. This made her angrier than before, and she blew her silver whistle twice. Straightway a great flock of wild crows came flying toward her, enough to darken the sky. And the Wicked Witch said to the King Crow, "Fly at once to the strangers, peck out their eyes, and tear them to pieces." The wild crows flew in one great flock toward Dorothy and her companions. When the little girl saw them coming, she was afraid. But the Scarecrow said, "This is my battle, so lie down beside me, and you will not be harmed." So they all lay upon the ground except the Scarecrow, and he stood up and stretched out his arms. And when the crows saw him, they were frightened, as these birds always are by scarecrows, and did not dare to come any nearer. But the King Crow said, "It is only a stuffed man. I will peck his eyes out." The King Crow flew at the Scarecrow, who caught it by the head and twisted its neck until it died. Then another crow flew at him, and the Scarecrow twisted its neck also. There were 40 crows, and 40 times the Scarecrow twisted a neck, until at last all were lying dead beside him. Then he called to his companions to rise, and again they went upon their journey. When the Wicked Witch looked out again and saw all her crows lying in a heap, she got in a terrible rage, and blew 3 times upon her silver whistle. Forthwith there was heard a great buzzing in the air, and a swarm of black bees came flying toward her. "Go to the strangers and sting them to death," commanded the witch. And the bees turned and flew rapidly until they came to where Dorothy and her friends were walking. But the woodman had seen them coming, and the Scarecrow had decided what to do. "Take out my straw and scatter it over the little girl and the dog and the lion," he said to the woodman, "and the bees cannot sting them." This the woodman did, and as Dorothy lay close beside the lion and held Toto in her arms, the straw covered them entirely. The bees came and found no one but the woodman to sting, so they all flew at him and broke off all their stings against the tin, without hurting the woodman at all. As bees cannot live without their stings, when their stings are broken, that was the end of the black bees, and they lay scattered thick about the woodman, like little heaps of fine coal. Then Dorothy and the lion got up,
and the girl helped the Tin Woodman put the straw back into the Scarecrow again, until he was as good as ever. So they started upon their journey once more. The Wicked Witch was so angry when she saw her black bees in little heaps like fine coal that she stamped her foot and tore her hair and gnashed her teeth. And then she called a dozen of her slaves, who were the Winkies, and gave them sharp spears, telling them to go to the strangers and destroy them. The Winkies were not a brave people, but they had to do as they were told. So they marched away until they came near to Dorothy. Then the lion gave a great roar and sprang towards them, and the poor Winkies were so frightened that they ran back as fast as they could. When they returned to the castle, the Wicked Witch beat them well with a strap and sent them back to their work. After which she sat down to think what she should do next. She could not understand how all her plans to destroy these strangers had failed. But she was a powerful witch, as well as a wicked one, and soon she made up her mind how to act. There was in her cupboard a golden cap, with a circle of diamonds and rubies running around it. This golden cap had a charm. Whoever owned it could call 3 times upon the winged monkeys, who would obey any order they were given. But no person could command these strange creatures more than 3 times. Twice already the Wicked Witch had used the charm of the cap. Once was when she had made the Winkies her slaves and set herself to rule over the country. The winged monkeys had helped her do this. The second time was when she had fought against the great Oz himself and driven him out of the land of the West. The winged monkeys had also helped her in doing this. Only once more could she use this golden cap, for which reason she did not like to do so until all her other powers were exhausted. But now that her fierce wolves and her wild crows and her stinging bees were gone, and her slaves had been scared away by the cowardly lion, she saw there was only one way left to destroy Dorothy and her friends. So the Wicked Witch took the golden cap from her cupboard and placed it upon her head. Then she stood upon her left foot and said, "Ep-pee, pep-pee, cack-kee." Next she stood upon her right foot and said, "Hillo, holo, hello." After this she stood upon both feet and cried in a loud voice, "Zizzy, zuzzy, zick." Now the charm began to work. The sky was darkened, and a low rumbling sound was heard in the air. There was a rush of many wings, a great chattering and laughing, and the sun came out of the dark sky to show the Wicked Witch surrounded by a crowd of monkeys, each with a pair of immense and powerful wings on his shoulders. One, much bigger than the others, seemed to be their leader. He flew close to the witch and said, "You have called us for the third and last time. What do you command?" "Go to the strangers who are within my land, and destroy them all except the lion," said the Wicked Witch. "Bring that beast to me, for I have a mind to harness him like a horse and make him work." "Your commands shall be obeyed," said the leader. Then, with a great deal of chattering and noise, the winged monkeys flew away to the place where Dorothy and her friends were walking. Some of the monkeys seized the Tin Woodman and carried him through the air until they were over a country thickly covered with sharp rocks. Here they dropped the poor woodman, who fell a great distance to the rocks, where he lay so battered and dented that he could neither move nor groan. Others of the monkeys caught the Scarecrow, and with their long fingers pulled all of the straw out of his clothes and head. They made his hat and boots and clothes into a small bundle and threw it into the top branches of a tall tree. The remaining monkeys threw pieces of stout rope around the lion and wound many coils about his body and head and legs until he was unable to bite or scratch or struggle in any way. Then they lifted him up and flew away with him to the witch's castle, where he was placed in a small yard with a high iron fence around it, so that he could not escape. But Dorothy they did not harm at all. She stood with Toto in her arms, watching the sad fate of her comrades and thinking it would soon be her turn. The leader of the winged monkeys flew up to her, his long, hairy arms stretched out and his ugly face grinning terribly. But he saw the mark of the good witch's kiss upon her forehead and stopped short, motioning the others not to touch her. "We dare not harm this little girl," he said to them, "for she is protected by the power of good, and that is greater than the power of evil. All we can do is to carry her to the castle of the wicked witch and leave her there." So, carefully and gently, they lifted Dorothy in their arms and carried her swiftly through the air until they came to the castle, where they set her down upon the front step. Then the leader said to the witch, "We have obeyed you as far as we were able. The Tin Woodman and the Scarecrow are destroyed. The lion is tied up in your yard. The little girl we dare not harm, nor the dog she carries in her arms. Your power over our band is now ended, and you will never see us again." Then all the winged monkeys, with much laughing and chattering and noise, flew into the air and were soon out of sight. The wicked witch was both surprised and worried when she saw the mark on Dorothy's forehead, for she knew well that neither the winged monkeys nor she herself dare hurt this girl in any way. She looked down at Dorothy's feet, and seeing the silver shoes began to tremble with fear, for she knew what a powerful charm belonged to them. At first the witch was tempted to run away from Dorothy, but she happened to look into the child's eyes and saw how simple the soul behind them was, and that the little girl did not know of the wonderful power of the silver shoes gave her. So the wicked witch laughed to herself and thought, "I can still make her my slave, for she does not know how to use her power." Then she said to Dorothy, harshly and severely, "Come with me, and see that you mind everything I tell you, for if you do not, I will make an end of you, as I did the Tin Woodman and the Scarecrow." Dorothy followed her through many of the beautiful rooms in her castle until they came to the kitchen, where the witch bade her clean the pots and kettles and sweep the floor, and keep the fire fed with wood. Dorothy went to work meekly, with her mind made up to work as hard as she could, for she was glad the wicked witch had decided not to kill her. With Dorothy hard at work, the witch thought she would go into the courtyard and harness the cowardly lion like a horse. It would amuse her, she was sure, to make him draw her chariot whenever she wished to go to drive. But as she opened the gate, the lion gave a loud roar and bounded at her so furiously that the witch was afraid and ran out and shut the gate again. "If I cannot harness you," said the witch to the lion, speaking through the bars of the gate, "I can starve you. You shall have nothing to eat until you do as I wish." So after that, she took no food to the imprisoned lion, but every day she came to the gate at noon and asked, "Are you ready to be harnessed like a horse?" And the lion would answer, "No. If you come in this yard, I will bite you." The reason the lion did not have to do as the witch wished was that every night, while the woman was asleep, Dorothy carried him food from the cupboard. After he had eaten, he would lie down on his bed of straw, and Dorothy would lie beside him and put her head on his soft, shaggy mane, while they talked of their troubles and tried to plan some way to escape. But they could find no way to get out of the castle, for it was constantly guarded by the yellow Winkies, who were the slaves of the wicked witch and too afraid of her not to do as she told them. The girl had to work hard during the day, and often the witch threatened to beat her with the same old umbrella she always carried in her hand. But in truth, she did not dare strike Dorothy, because of the mark upon her forehead. The child did not know this, and was full of fear for herself and Toto. Once the witch struck Toto a blow with her umbrella, and the brave little dog flew at her and bit her leg in return. The witch did not bleed where she was bitten, for she was so wicked that the blood in her had dried up many years ago. Dorothy's life became very sad as she grew to understand that it would be harder than ever to get back to Kansas and Aunt Em again. Sometimes she would cry bitterly for hours, with Toto sitting at her feet and looking into her face, whining dismally to show how sorry he was for his little mistress. Toto did not really care whether he was in Kansas or in the land of Oz, so long as Dorothy was with him. But he knew the little girl was unhappy, and that made him unhappy too. Now the wicked witch had a great longing to have for her own the silver shoes, which the girl always wore. Her bees and her crows and her wolves were lying in heaps and drying up, and she had used up all the power of the golden cap. But if she could only get hold of the silver shoes, they would give her more power than all the other things she had lost. She watched Dorothy carefully to see if she ever took off her shoes, thinking she might steal them. But the child was so proud of her pretty shoes that she never took them off except at night when she took her bath. The witch was too much afraid of the dark to dare go in Dorothy's room at night to take the shoes, and her dread of water was greater than her fear of the dark, so she never came near when Dorothy was bathing. Indeed, the old witch never touched water, nor ever let water touch her in any way. But the wicked creature was very cunning, and she finally thought of a trick that would give her what she wanted. She placed a bar of iron in the middle of the kitchen floor, and then, by her magic arts, made the iron invisible to human eyes, so that when Dorothy walked across the floor, she stumbled over the bar, not being able to see it, and fell at full length. She was not much hurt, but in her fall one of the silver shoes came off, and before she could reach it, the witch had snatched it away and put it on her own skinny foot. The wicked woman was greatly pleased with the success of her trick, for as long as she had one of the shoes, she owned half the power of their charm, and Dorothy could not use it against her, even had she known how to do so. The little girl, seeing as she had lost one of her pretty shoes, grew angry and said to the witch, "Give me back my shoe." "I will not," retorted the witch, "for it is now my shoe, and not yours." "You are a wicked creature," cried Dorothy. "You have no right to take my shoe from me." "I shall keep it just the same," said the witch, laughing at her, "and some day I shall get the other one from you too." This made Dorothy so very angry that she picked up the bucket of water that stood near and dashed it over the witch, wetting her from head to toe. Instantly, the wicked woman gave a loud cry of fear, and then, as Dorothy looked at her in wonder, the witch began to shrink and fall away.
"See what you have done," she screamed. "In a minute I shall melt away."
"I'm very sorry indeed," said Dorothy, who was truly frightened to see the witch actually melting away like brown sugar before her eyes.
"Didn't you know water would be the end of me?"
asked the witch in a wailing, despairing voice.
"Of course not," answered Dorothy. "How should I?" "Well, in a few minutes I shall be all melted, and you will have to have the castle to yourself. I have been wicked in my day, but I never thought a little girl like you would ever be able to melt me and end my wicked deeds. Look out! Here I go!"
With these words, the witch fell down in a brown, melted, shapeless mass, and began to spread over the clean boards of the kitchen floor. Seeing that she had really melted away to nothing, Dorothy drew near, drew another bucket of water, and threw it over the mess. Then she swept it all out the door. After picking out the silver shoe, which was all that was left of the old woman, she cleaned and dried it with a cloth, and put it on her foot again. Then, being at last free to do as she chose, she ran out to the courtyard to tell the lion that the wicked witch of the West had come to an end, and that they were no longer prisoners in a strange land. Chapter 13. The Rescue. The Cowardly Lion was as much pleased to hear that the wicked witch had been melted by a bucket of water, and Dorothy at once unlocked the gate of his prison and set him free. They went in together to the castle, where Dorothy's first act was to call all the Winkies together and tell them that they were no longer slaves. There was great rejoicing among the yellow Winkies, for they had been made to work hard during many years for the wicked witch, who had always treated them with great cruelty. They kept this day as a holiday, and then and ever after spent the time in feasting and dancing. "If our friends, the Scarecrow and the Tin Woodman, were only with us," said the lion, "I should be quite happy."
"Do you suppose we could rescue them?" asked the girl anxiously.
"We can try," answered the lion. So they called the yellow Winkies and asked them if they would help to rescue their friends. And the Winkies said that they would be delighted to do all in their power for Dorothy, who had set them free from bondage. So she chose a number of the Winkies who looked as if they knew the most, and they all started away. They traveled that day to the part and part of the next until they came to the rocky plain where the Tin Woodman lay all battered and bent. His axe was near him, but the blade was rusted and the handle broken off short. The Winkies lifted him tenderly in their arms and carried him back to the yellow castle again, Dorothy shedding a few tears by the way at the sad plight of her old friend, and the lion looking sober and sorry. When they reached the castle, Dorothy said to the Winkies,
"Are any of your people tinsmiths?" "Oh, yes, some of us are very good tinsmiths," they told her.
"Then bring them to me," she said. And when the tinsmiths came, bringing them all their tools and baskets, she inquired, "Can you straighten out those dents in the Tin Woodman and bend him back into shape again, and solder him together where he's broken?" The tinsmiths looked the woodman over carefully, and then answered that they thought they could mend him so he would be as good as ever. So they set to work in one of the big yellow rooms of the castle, and worked for 3 days and 4 nights, hammering and twisting and bending and soldering and polishing and pounding at the legs and body and head of the Tin Woodman, until at last he was straightened out into his old form, and his joints worked as well as ever. To be sure, there were several patches on him, but the tinsmiths did a good job, and as the woodman was not a vain man, he did not mind the patches at all. When at last he walked into Dorothy's room and thanked her for rescuing him, he was so pleased he wept tears of joy, and Dorothy had to wipe every tear carefully from his face with her apron so his joints would not be rusted. At the same time, her own tears fell thick and fast at the joy of meeting her old friend again, and these tears did not need to be wiped away. As for the lion, he wiped his eyes so often with the tip of his tail that it became quite wet, and he was obliged to go out into the courtyard and hold it in the sun till it dried. "If we only had the Scarecrow with us again," said the Tin Woodman, when Dorothy had finished telling him everything that had happened, "I should be quite happy." "We must try to find him," said the girl. So she called the Winkies to help her, and they walked all that day and part of the next until they came to the tall tree in the branches of which the winged monkeys had tossed the Scarecrow's clothes. It was a very tall tree, and the trunk was so smooth that no one could climb it. But the woodman said at once, "I'll chop it down. Then we can get the Scarecrow's clothes." Now, while the tinsmiths had been at work mending the woodman himself, another of the Winkies, who was a goldsmith, had made an axe handle of solid gold and fitted it to the woodman's axe instead of the old broken handle. Others polished the blade until all the rust was removed, and it glistened like burnished silver. As soon as he had spoken, the Tin Woodman began to chop, and in a short time the tree fell over with a crash, whereupon the Scarecrow's clothes fell out of the branches and rolled off on the ground. Dorothy picked them up and had the Winkies carry them back to the castle, where they were stuffed with nice, clean straw. And behold, here was the Scarecrow, as good as ever, thanking them over and over again for saving him. Now that they were reunited, Dorothy and her friends spent a few happy days at the Yellow Castle, where they found everything they needed to make them comfortable. But one day the girl thought of Aunt Em and said, "We must go back to Oz and claim his promise." "Yes," said the woodman. "At last I shall get my heart." "At last I shall get my brains," added the Scarecrow. "And I shall get my courage," said the lion thoughtfully. "And I shall go back to Kansas," cried Dorothy, clapping her hands. "Oh, let us start for the Emerald City tomorrow." This they decided to do. The next day they called the Winkies together and bade them goodbye. The Winkies were sorry to have them go, and they had grown so fond of the Tin Woodman that they begged him to stay and rule over them and the yellow land of the West. Finding they were determined to go, the Winkies gave Toto and the lion each a golden collar, and to Dorothy they presented a beautiful bracelet studded with diamonds, and to the Scarecrow they gave a gold-headed walking stick to keep him from stumbling, and to the Tin Woodman they offered a silver oil can inlaid with gold and set with precious jewels. Each one of the travelers made the Winkies a pretty speech in return, and all shook hands with them until their arms ached. Dorothy went to the witch's cupboard to fill her basket with food for the journey, and there she saw the golden cap, and tried it on her own head, and found that it fitted her exactly. She did not know anything about the charm of the golden cap, but she saw that it was pretty. So she made up her mind to wear it and carry her sunbonnet in the basket. Then, being prepared for the journey, they all started for the Emerald City, and the Winkies gave them 3 cheers and many good wishes to carry with them. Well, hello, Katie, over there on the tubes. then. Hey, Kathy, how are you? Well, we are down to the last chapter that we're going to read tonight. I have to say, this has been incredibly fun to do this, and I can't wait until Friday to finish the book. We might, you're very welcome, we might have some interesting things for after the story's finished, because it won't take the whole 2 hours to finish it. So, but I will let you guys all just think and guess and wait. Anyway, well, I'm glad you're all enjoying this. Oh, Ash. Well, we'll be done soon. All right. Chapter 14. The Winged Monkeys. You will remember there was no road, not even a pathway, between the castle of the Wicked Witch and the Emerald City. When the 4 travelers went in search of the witch, she had seen them coming, and so sent the winged monkeys to bring them to her. It was much harder to find their way back through the big fields of buttercups and yellow daisies than it was being carried. They knew, of course, they must go straight east toward the rising sun, and they started off in the right way. But at noon, when the sun was over their heads, they did not know which was east and which was west. And that was the reason they were lost in the great fields. They kept on walking, however, and at night the moon came out and shone brightly. So they lay down among the sweet-smelling yellow flowers and slept soundly until morning. All but the Scarecrow and the Tin Woodman. The next morning the sun was behind a cloud, but they started on, as if they were quite sure which way they were going. If we walk far enough," said Dorothy, "I'm sure we shall sometime come to some place." But day by day passed away, and they still saw nothing before them but the scarlet fields. The Scarecrow began to grumble a bit. "We have surely lost our way," he said, "and unless we find it again in time to reach the Emerald City, I shall never get my brains." "Nor I my heart," declared the Tin Woodman. "It seems to me I can scarcely wait till I get to Oz, and you must admit this is a very long journey." "You see," said the Cowardly Lion with a whimper, "I haven't the courage to keep tramping forever without getting anywhere at all." Then Dorothy lost heart. She sat down on the grass and looked at her companions, and they sat down and looked at her. And Toto found that for the first time in his life he was too tired to chase a butterfly that flew past his head. So he put out his tongue and panted and looked at Dorothy as if to ask what they should do next. "Suppose we call the field mice," she suggested. "They could probably tell us the way to the Emerald City." "To be sure they could," cried the Scarecrow. "Why didn't we think of that before?" Dorothy blew the little whistle she had always carried about her neck since the Queen of the Mice had given it to her. In a few minutes they heard the pattering of tiny feet, and many of the small gray mice came running up to her. Among them was the Queen herself, who asked in her squeaky little voice, "What can I do for my friends?" "We have lost our way," said Dorothy. "Can you tell us where the Emerald City is?" "Certainly," answered the Queen, "but it is a great way off, for you have had it at your backs all this time." Then she noticed Dorothy's golden cap and said,
Why don't you use the charm of the cap and call the winged monkeys to you? They will carry you to the city of Oz in less than an hour."
"I didn't know there was a charm," answered Dorothy in surprise. "What is it?"
"It is written inside the golden cap," replied the Queen of the Mice. "But if you are going to call the winged monkeys, we must run away, for they are full of mischief and think it is great fun to plague us."
"They won't hurt me?" asked the girl anxiously.
"Oh, no, they must obey the wearer of the cap. Goodbye."
And she scampered out of sight, with all the mice hurrying after her. Dorothy looked inside the golden cap and saw some words written upon the lining. And these she thought must be the charm, so she read the directions carefully and put the cap upon her head.
"Ep, pee, pep, pee, cack, key," she said, standing on her left foot. "What did you say?" asked the Scarecrow, who did not know what she was doing. "Hillo, ho-lo, hello," Dorothy went on, standing this time on her right foot.
"Hello," replied the Tin Woodman calmly.
"Zizzy, zuzzy, zick,"
said Dorothy, who was now standing on both feet. This ended the saying of the charm, and they heard a great chattering and flapping of wings as the band of winged monkeys flew up to them. The king bowed low before Dorothy and asked, "What is your command?"
"We wish to go to the Emerald City," said the child, "and we have lost our way."
"We will carry you," replied the king, and no sooner had he spoken than two of the monkeys caught Dorothy in their arms and flew away with her. Others took the Scarecrow and the Woodman and the Lion, and one little monkey seized Toto and flew after them, although the dog tried hard to bite him. The Scarecrow and the Tin Woodman were rather frightened at first, for they remembered how badly the winged monkeys had treated them before. But they saw that no harm was intended, so they rode through the air quite cheerfully and had a fine time looking at the pretty gardens and woods far below them. Dorothy found herself riding easily between two of the biggest monkeys, one of them the king himself. They had made a chair of their hands and were careful not to hurt her.
"Why do you have to obey the charm of the golden cap?" she asked.
"That is a long story," answered the king with a winged laugh, "but as we have a long journey before us, I will pass the time by telling you about it, if you wish."
"I shall be glad to hear it," she replied.
"Once," began the leader, "we were a free people, living happily in the great forest, flying from tree to tree, eating nuts and fruit, and doing just as we pleased without calling anybody master. Perhaps some of us were rather too full of mischief at times, flying down to pull the tails of animals that had no wings, chasing birds and throwing nuts at people who walked in the forest. But we were careless and happy and full of fun, and enjoyed every minute of the day. This was many years ago, long before Oz came out of the clouds to rule over his land. There lived here then, away at the north, a beautiful princess, who was also a powerful sorceress. All her magic was used to help the people, and she was never known to hurt anyone who was good. Her name was Galet, and she lived in a handsome place built from the great blocks of ruby. Everyone loved her, but her greatest sorrow was that she could find no one to love in return, since all the men were much too stupid and ugly to mate with one so beautiful and wise. At last, however, she found a boy who was very handsome and manly and wise beyond his years. Galet made up her mind that when he grew to be a man, she would make him her husband. So she took him to her ruby palace and used all her magic powers to make him as strong and good, as lovely as any woman could wish. When he grew to manhood, Kulala, as he was called, was said to be the best and wisest man in all the land, while his manly beauty was so great that Gaeleth loved him dearly and hastened to make everything ready for the wedding. My grandfather was at that time the king of the wind monkeys, which lived in the forest near Gaeleth's palace, and the old fellow loved the joke better than a good dinner. One day, just before the wedding, my grandfather was flying out with his band when he saw Kulala walking beside the river. He was dressed in a rich costume of pink silk and purple velvet, and my grandfather thought he would see what he could do. At his word, the band flew down and seized Kulala, carried him in their arms until they were over the middle of the river, and then dropped him into the water. "Swim out, my fine fellow," cried my grandfather, "and see if the water has spotted your clothes." Kulala was much too wise not to swim, and he was not the least spoiled by all this good fortune. He laughed when he came to the top of the water and swam into shore. But when Gaeleth came running out to him, she found his silks and velvet all ruined by the river. The princess was angry, and she knew, of course, who did it. She had all the winged monkeys brought before her, and she said at first that their wings should be tied, and they should be treated as they had treated Kulala, and dropped into the river. But my grandfather pleaded hard, for he knew the monkeys would drown in the river if their wings were tied, and Kulala said a kind word for them also, so that Gaeleth finally spared them, on the condition that the winged monkeys should ever after do 3 times the bidding of the owner of the golden cap. This cap had been made for a wedding present to Kulala, and it is said to have cost the princess half her kingdom. Of course, my grandfather and all the other monkeys at once agreed to the condition, and that is how it happens that we are 3 times the slaves of the owner of the golden cap, whosoever he may be.
"And what became of them?" asked Dorothy, who had been greatly interested in the story.
"Kulala being the first owner of the golden cap," replied the monkey, "he was the first to lay his wishes upon us. As his bride could not bear the sight of us, he called us all to him in the forest after he had married her, and ordered us always to keep where she could never again set eyes on a winged monkey, which we were glad to do, for we are all afraid of her. This was all we ever had to do until the golden cap fell into the hands of the wicked witch of the west, who made us enslave the Winkies, and afterward drive Oz himself out of the land of the west. Now the golden cap is yours, and 3 times you have the right to lay your wishes upon us."
As the monkey king finished his story, Dorothy looked down and saw the green, shining walls of the Emerald City before them. She wondered at the rapid flight of the monkeys, but was glad the journey was over. The strange creatures set the travelers down carefully before the gate of the city. The king bowed low to Dorothy, and then flew swiftly away, followed by all his band. "That was a good ride."
"Yes, and a quick way out of our troubles," replied the lion. "How lucky it was you brought away that wonderful cap."
Well, that is where we're going to stop for tonight. Friday, we will pick up with chapter 15, and we will go all the way to the end of the book. So I am super happy. This has been a great event so far, and I suspect this won't be the last time that we do this. I've had a great amount of fun,
And I'm thankful for all of you coming here on this journey with me to experience The Wizard of Oz. And I think the it's interesting at some point, Wings. Yeah. So it's what's interesting that I found was that I forgot how violent this book is. I mean, like, Tin Woodman chopping off wolf heads, and then the scarecrow just twisting crows' necks. I'm like, what? That's insane. Kind of hilarious, but at the same time, um, Queen of Denial. I plan to. I mean, there's 14 books in the Oz series, in the original series that was all written by Baum. So yeah, Sarah, you got the Jim Jams, right? Yeah, it's just you know we're just over here casually twisting crows' necks. Holy cow, it was just brutal. Jim Jams. Yes, it's the thing I love about this community that we've all kind of put together is that we have inside jokes. Like if you weren't here on the night that the Jim Jams thing happened, like you like what are they talking about? So, but yes, there was a story that we read last week, I think, where one of the characters said that something gave him the Jim Jams, and immediately we all latched onto it, and it's been the funny thing. Oh, but yeah, so it's it's been a journey. So, um, similar to Bunny Foo. Yes, yes, it is like the Bunny Foo song. It's just like what? But no, I so after this next Sunday, so this coming Sunday, we'll be starting Charlotte's Web. That'll take us 2 nights, probably 2 Sundays. Next Wednesday and Friday, we'll be back to reading some short fiction. I know someone, and I can't remember who, had requested The Jaunt by Stephen King. I am actually going to read that when I'm off the live tonight, and see if, because, see, here's the thing with Stephen King. So, Stephen King, read it. Yes, we actually did the Yellow Wallpaper. It's a great story. I love it. Um, so, the thing with Stephen King, and I have the same problem with Richard Matheson, they can get a little, they can use offensive language. Um, and I have to be careful. There's also some stories that like I just can't read because they're too violent. Though I will say the rainy season with the monster frogs, that was an interesting one. That was very interesting. Oh, you met him in person. Awesome. I've heard he's a good dude. Um you know so I have this crazy idea about this whole thing that I'm doing, is to do like live, like in person, where I both stream and have people in a like I'm at like a cafe or something, and where I have an audience, a live audience, and then I'm also streaming. And I thought it would be so cool to do like different. So what I would want to do is I would want to go to like different locations and read stories that either take place in that location or are by an author that is from that location. Yes, Veshiva, something like that. So, and like you see, like people do live podcasts. So, I mean, I'm like, why can't I do that? You know, we'd have to. I mean, need more followers, but what would be really cool would I had this like crazy like daydream idea where I would go to Maine and I would somehow get Stephen King to come and hang out, and we could read one of his stories or two of his stories or whatever, and just do like a Q&A afterwards, you know, things like that. Like I had this like crazy idea and I'm going, I kind of like to like dream big, you know, because honestly, this thing is like something I never thought would happen. Make it so, number one. Yes, Eddie, exactly. Um, I know I've told a lot of you this, the fact that I got laid off in July and last July, and I've been out of work for almost a year. Um, and I am surviving through the kindness of strangers and uh, the generosity of friends and family. But I'm doing this as well, and I'm doing audiobooks, which is actually there's I'm getting paid for that, which is really cool. And I'm getting to the point where I might actually soon be able to make a full-time living doing it and this. So I when I started doing this back in August, I was doing it just to maintain my sanity. It was something to do. And I mean, I love reading, to my kids, and I haven't been able to do that because they're, 18 and 20, and one of them lives 3,000 miles away. And then this started to gain traction, and more people would come in and more people would follow. And the next thing I know, I've got 12,000 followers, and I'm like, and the cool part is those 12,000 people, almost all of them have come from these lives. Now, I am blessed to have all of you. That's the thing. And so they're people that, like, their intention, like, I didn't go viral to get all these followers, They are people who came to my live and said, I want more of this, which is so cool. Sarah, you watch wherever you choose. And I mean that, I eventually will probably, I'm always going to stream here on TikTok. I would like to grow more on the tubes, but that's a slower process. Thank you, Rita. And that's the thing. So my kids, I have two daughters, and one of them my oldest lives with me, and she goes to college. My youngest lives with her mother in Liverpool in the UK. And I spent the last 14 years working in an office doing a job, not a career, a job. And I did that because it paid the bills and I was good at it, So it served me well being a single father, And the thing is, when I got pushed into this, to make a choice, I had to do something, and I took on this whole idea of it was my current voice acting mentor reached out to me and said, "Hey, you should be doing this for a living." And I was like, "Seriously?" And then I had another professional voice actor say the same thing. So I was like, you know what? I like doing this. I'm going to give it a shot. And then I got my first audiobook. And I was like, this is amazing. I really enjoy this. And I can get paid for this? That's crazy. So here I am. And part of it is this. I wanted to show my kids that having a dream and pursuing that dream is worth it. I wanted to, and it's turned out to be not just my kids. I wanted to prove to people that if you have a dream, run after it. And when you want to do something like this, you have to, yeah. Rita, you, oh boy, I tell you, that's a subject. But you have to put all of your energy into it. And I will say this, very few people who go into pursuing a creative field who have a backup plan become successful in their creative field. They always end up in the backup plan. But the people that are successful in their creative field, they didn't have a backup plan. They said, I have to do this. And I'm going to put all of my energy into it. And that's how they made it. Is there luck involved? Yeah. But a lot of it is putting your energy into, putting in the work, putting in the time, being consistent. Like, according to TikTok, I've gone live every week for the past 34 weeks, which is wild to me. And I do this 3 nights a week. For those of you that are new, I stream on Sundays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, all 3 days. Sunday is for family-friendly chapter books. Some of them take multiple nights. This has been a very... I haven't run into that yet, Rita. I have not run into that yet, but we'll find out, I'm sure, eventually. If I can get out of bed, I will probably come and do this anyway. Because doing this, I can have the worst mental health day. And then I come in to do this, and it's like, I feel so much better. Because I feel like I've done something worthwhile. And worthwhile for myself, worthwhile for all of you. And that matters. You know, when I get a comment that says, thank you for keeping me alive tonight. Like, I cried when I saw that. And this was probably like 4 or 5 weeks ago. And that, to me, says that what I do here matters. You know, and I went to my voice acting group and I told them, I said, I showed them the comment and I said, if you ever doubt that what you do as a voice actor, as an audiobook narrator, doesn't matter, if you ever doubt that it matters, look at this. It does. It does matter. Because storytelling is a tradition that goes back for the whole of human history. And whether you're telling your own story that you've created yourself, or you're telling a story that's been passed down for generations, or one that's been written recently, it does something. It does something to the people who are listening. It does something to their mind, to their soul. Sure, Zan, go ahead and reach out to me. That's totally fine. Well, Kathy, I appreciate you. I think, I don't know. It's just something, and I enjoy the crap out of it. Crazy Mama, I used to get audiobooks on tape from the library. Clint, you're right. It is an escape from reality. And, as I've said many times before, with as absolutely crazy as the world is right now, being able to set aside these 2 hours 3 times a week and have you all be calm, have a place to sit and relax and listen to a story. Book Drag, my favorite book that I can't live without. I will tell you it is. I can't pick one book, but I will tell you that the Dark Tower series by Stephen King is probably the best that I've ever read. It is absolutely his magnum opus, and I love how his universe is all interconnected. I've read the entire series probably 3 times. And it's funny, the first time I read it, I had to go back through, like I would stop and read some of the stories that were related to the Dark Tower, like Salem's Lot. So it took me almost a year to get through it the first time I read it. But yeah, it's fantastic. And I love that book. I love that book. If I were to pick another one, it would be there's so many. It would be probably Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep by Philip K. Dick. I can't recommend that enough. There's also 2 other of his books, Ubik and Valis. If you've never read them and you like stories that mess with your head, those are 2 I can't recommend enough. The Poisonwood Bible. I'll have to look that up. I'll have to look it up. I mean, there are a couple of books that I would love to read, but they're super long, so it's like it would take like 3 months to get through it. Secret Garden is one that I want to put on my reading list for Sundays. Well, it is now 11 minutes after 8 here on the East Coast, and I think it's time to sign off. So that is where we will leave our story tonight, with the Winged Monkeys having dropped Dorothy and her friends back at the Emerald City to go see Oz again. Thank you all for spending a little time with me this evening. Join me on Friday for the final night of The Wonderful Wizard of Oz. And if you are enjoying this journey and would like to help support what I do here, please consider subscribing. It helps keep the campfire lit. Until then, please be kind to each other. And be kind to yourself, because kindness matters. And so do you. Good night, everybody.